Welcome, Shashikala ji. It's a pleasure to host you today. Acropolis is a school of philosophy in a classical tradition. Now, what we mean by classical tradition? By classical tradition, we mean that Acropolis believes that philosophy is to be pursued as a way of life, as a means to access the spiritual knowledge for individual as well as collective realization. It is something that you live and that you absorb, and then actually that you spread by living. We learn from the traditional knowledge of East and West, which combines of sciences, arts, religions, and philosophies in a comparative way. Culture Circle, because of which we have gathered here today, Culture Circle is an initiative, a step forward in the same direction. Culture Circle explores and celebrates the diverse expressions of art, culture, with philosophical essence through a series of intimate and interactive monthly events in an attempt to revive the spiritual essence that forms the very basis of all classical arts. Together, as part of Acropolis, we, with the help of teachers and the framework, members learn to apply philosophy to know more about themselves, explore their relationship with nature and the world around us, instead of keeping it limited to theory and debates. In a way, it's truly an adventure, and that has the potential to change the way we conduct ourselves as a human being. Please welcome Sashikala ji, who has been kind enough to take out time for us to share with us how Vaastu Shastra is not limited to physical living spaces alone, but also about supporting the construct and sustenance of society from the perspective of not only physical, but the spiritual well-being of individual, well-being of the society and collective together. Sashikala ji holds a degree in architecture from the School of Architecture, Madras University. She has researched the classical Indian science of architecture, Vaastu, for over 30 years. She has been student of yoga and Vedanta for the last 35 years. This combination of yoga, Vaastu, and Vedanta has helped her to move into a position of mentoring young minds to understand and reflect upon the wisdom of the Indian tradition. She's a student of Sri V. Ganpati Satpathy, leading authority on Vaastu Shastra, from whom she has learned both textual knowledge and the practical field application. Her books on Vaastu include the Indian tradition of design based on Vaastu Shastra, the Penguin Guide to Vaastu, and Vaastu, a path to harmonious living. So Shashikala ji, it's an honor to be part of the session today and learn more about Vaastu Shastra, the wisdom and the art in a deeper manner, along with everybody here in the session.
Thank you to New Acropolis for this great opportunity. I do believe that Vaastu Shastra is very important for people to start paying attention to, because there is a lot of not very pleasant data floating around using the fear of people. So for us to bring the Vaastu Shastra in its original form is very important. And unlike other traditional subjects like Ayurveda and yoga, Vaastu has actually been sidelined quite a bit. When I went to study with Ganapati Stapati, that was in, ages ago, in 82 actually, my college had, which was a school of architecture, and subsequently I found out from all the colleges in India, not one of them teaches Vaastu Shastra. And it's the oldest living system of architecture in the world. And they completely ignore it. So for me, it was a huge responsibility to study it and make it available for the contemporary mind. And I was probably the first woman to learn it. It was a male stronghold. But now there are many women who are practicing it, teaching it, and so on. And in the last 15 years, I have been able to teach this to a lot of students of architecture. And I now have 7 architects working with me who have studied Vaastu Shastra, and we are also trying to design and build with it. So the most important thing for you people to remember and probably hold in your mind is that historically, Vastu Shastras go back to Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, which means 2000, 3000 BC. But as is the most important aspect of all traditional wisdom, the practice is the first, and then the writing of the text. So the text is obviously not as old as the practice that was already there in the field. So the gridiron pattern of the settlement in the Mohenjo-daro, Lothal, and all those areas is very typical of what the Vastu Shastra is talking about. And the practitioners of Vastu Shastra are called the Vishwakarma. They belong to 5 different categories. They worked with metal, they worked with wood, and then they also were jewelers. They were also part of the Vishwakarma community. They're called Manu, Maya, Twashta, Shilpi, and Vishwagnya. These were the 5 subgroups in the Vishwakarma community who completely looked after the design of the environment until the British period, when unfortunately the Western education was brought in. These people were deprived of their building licenses. Today they cannot even build without the license of a superintendent engineer. So in the last 300 years, this particular system has been more or less sidelined to only building religious buildings and nothing else. Though they were actually residential builders, builders of social structures, commercial buildings, and so on. So having said that, I want to now go into what does Vastu Shastra really stand for. There are 2 critical words in the Vastu Shastra, which would be very interesting and important for all of you, even though you may not be designers. Vastu and Vaastu. A lot of people call it Vastu Shastra. It is not. It is Vaastu Shastra, the A, okay? Or it is also known as Vaastu Shilpa Shastra. The word Vastu refers to the built form. Shilpa refers to the individual elements, like sculpture or any ornamental artwork. So the Vastu comes from the word Vastu. Vastu has 2 meanings. Vas means is to reside. Vas also means that it is an object, Vastu. It comes from Vastu. Okay. So to reside or locate an object or an item or an element is the root. And then if I take the element and place it on my palm, the palm becomes the Vastu and this finger becomes the Vastu. It means the object is located on a 2-dimensional space, or if I enclose it, it is located within a 3-dimensional space. So the Vastu is the sculpture or Shilpam, and Vastu is the space. Together, they combine to form the built environment or the body of any object which encloses space. Okay. So all objects actually, when you place it, it becomes a Vastu and a Vastu. I place the on another palm, this becomes the Vastu and this becomes the Vastu, and so on, endlessly. Every object is occupying a space and it has a relationship with that space. Vastu and Vastu, Vastu and Vastu. So they are envelopes. Every object is enclosed in an envelope, which in turn becomes an object which is enclosed in an envelope. So the Vastu Shastras are saying, Bhumi Prathama Vastu. The earth is the first object. Bhumi Prathama Vastu. It's also the first space. Okay. So every site is a space. every aspect of the traditional wisdom has two sides to it. There is a rational side and there is a mystical or a spiritual side. Okay, you can call it mystical, you can call it spiritual. It depends on where you're coming from. I prefer to use the word mystical because mystical means the capacity to look at things in an abstract manner. Okay, so you have the linear, logical, cerebral aspect, and then you have the cyclical system, which is the way Kala or time is looked at in the system of Sanatana Dharma. Then you have the need for tangible evidence. Anything that is not physically visible, I cannot see. Then there is the emotional, impulsive response, which says, I feel, and therefore I know it exists. Then there is the side which says, the ordinary is real, the extraordinary is a lie. But then there is also the fact of our own experience or anubhava, which says the extraordinary is part of life. Even while you have the ordinary going on, the extraordinary is capable of bursting forth. So the other problem is that almost all our university education starts from the science and technology of Europe. And the assumption being there was no other science and technology, science only originates from Europe. But the fact is, science and technology has been part of all tribal societies, all civilizations. Otherwise, they couldn't have done what they had done. The buildings they have created, the medical work that they have done, the herbal work that they have done, agriculture, all the rest of it. So truth is varied. Okay, that is the other aspect. The observer makes it tangible. So where I'm standing and looking at it creates a relationship between me and that truth. So there is no such thing as one truth. Then the next one is the parameters must be clear. There cannot be any ambiguity in life. The other side of it is parameters can be deceptive, as we all know. Ambiguity is a part of all experience. So these two aspects, it's almost like two plates on a balancing system. The fact is that from my understanding of the traditional knowledge, both exist simultaneously. So there is no choice of saying this is the only way or this is the only way. There is a combination or a blending of the two. So how do you blend? How do you bring things together? The first understanding I got through my study, through my personal work with myself, my family, my teaching, bringing up children, growing some herbs and vegetables, organic stuff all my life, there has been an understanding of Vaastu and Ayurveda and yoga as the apex. Almost all systems of the traditional paths, which have been the music and dance and the subsidiary systems, all of them insist upon a path of personal excellence, which is yoga. Whichever subject that you choose and you want to work on, there has to be a personal excellence. There has to be a discipline of inner practices and outer practices. Okay. Vaastu is that relationship of the object and space, as I already told you. Yoga is the subject which deals with the self, the inner spaces, and the ability to respond to outer space. Ayurveda deals with personal wellness and harmony, food, and healing. So the three of them, unless they come together, unless they converge, we cannot have have either balance or harmony, either in the self or in the context that we are inhabiting. Okay. So there is an inner space we already talked about and the outer form. So I'm going into one of the very important principles of Vaastu Shastra. This comes in the Mahabharata, where there is a particular sequence where the architect Maya, who is supposed to be the architect of the Danavas or the Asuras, meets Arjuna and tells him, I can create this beautiful architecture for you, which is composed of three aspects: Bhogadhyam, Sukha Darshanam, and Ramya. Bhogadhyam means understanding form and function, utility. Sukha Darshanam is aesthetics. Darshanam is deceptive. It doesn't mean only what you can see, what you can touch, what you can feel, what you can observe, what you can smell. Everything comes into it, all aesthetics. Ramya is a very tricky word. Ramya actually means inner wellness or delight. So anything that you create in the world outside should not only be capable of being used well and have certain aesthetic components, but it must cause delight to the user. One of the most effective, best, I would say, the manifested example of this is the mud pot. It is capable of keeping the water cool. It is easy to use, and it looks beautiful, and it can even be used as an art object, as a display object, which I cannot say about this silly little pen. Okay. The next one. Yeah. So what is it when you say Bhogadyam, Sukha Darshanam and Ramya? What is the essential underpinning for these principles to manifest? Essential underpinning is Bhumi Prathama Vastu, I already told you. What is the nature of land that we are relating to when we build something on it, when we grow something in it, or when we stand on it, when we walk barefoot in the garden on the grass? What is it that is being picked up by our body? What is it that is being picked up by the seed, which becomes a tree, and so on? That is the essential energy that is running or coursing through the earth, unseen energy, which is capable of creating life, supporting life, nurturing life. So when we build with a certain respect and responsibility to the energies that are there in the land, we can create something that is capable of offering wellness and prosperity to the user. Okay. The traditional Vishwakarma had a particular methodology of teaching, which is very important for us to understand. Because today our educational system is a complete flop, as far as I'm concerned. People have so much of information, nothing is embodied. They have absolutely no idea how to construct a mind map through which they can effectively relate to the world outside and to the inner world within themselves when there is a crisis, which is what's happening today, right? So what did the Parampara Siksha teach the child, the Vishwakarma child? Skill building, drawing, sculpting, all the rest of it. They felt the material. They had to learn. They touched the stone, the brick, the mortar, the earth, the wood, the metal, and so on. They had to study the Vaastu Shilpa Shastra. Usually they worked in the yard during the day and studied in the evening with the master. Then they also had to study all the allied subjects. They had to understand Vedanta. They had to recite the Vedas. They had to work with a dancer, a musician, to understand the rasa of these subjects. So rasa anubhava, Rasanubhava means being able to experience with enormous amount of savoring, where you stay with that feeling for a long period of time. So all of this appreciation of the fine arts can also be called yoga sadhana. The next very important aspect of the Vastu Shastras, particularly in Shilpa Shastra, is what is known as tala. It's the same word in music and dance as well as in sculpture and architecture. Tala means rhythm. It means order. Okay. So anything that is rhythmic in nature, capable of being proportionately in a balance, where in music you call it the sound and the silence, the relationship between sound and silence. In architecture, it would be form and space, projections and darkness, that spaces which create darkness. So light and darkness. So this ability to blend in an orderly manner the various polarized experiences is tala. And in architecture, it is very critical. Yeah. All right. So there are lots of talas. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm picking up a few of the tala in sculpture so that you get an idea. The form of the images which are placed within the temple, the Garbhagriha, can be composed in various proportions. And the proportion is based on the length of the face. So how many times, multiples of that length of the face is the height of the body or height of the figure that is reclining, standing, sitting, or it can be the dancing figure. So you had various figures, and starting with Ekatala, which means the one proportion, all the way to Dashatala, which is the 10 proportion of 10. So not only do the divine images get fashioned in this Dashatala, you can always also have a Buddha image. Buddha and Mahavira were also fashioned in Dashatala, where the face length into 10 is the height of the body. And then Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, and then also the female deities, consorts of all the male figures. They were also in 10, 1:10. So there is a bhanga. Bhanga means the shift or flexion in the body. So there is a straight line which runs from the top of the head to the base of your feet. And an erect standing posture is known as Samapada Sthanakam. But when that body starts moving through dance, and the classic example is that of the Nataraja, everything is mathematically located. Every part of every symbol, starting from that Muyalakan whom the Lord is dancing on, which is avidya, the form of misapprehension, wrong knowledge. Everything is actually in proportion. And there is a central axis which runs through from the top of the head to the base of the feet, and the body is shifted away from it. And because of this, the Dashatala would have reduced in height. Even that will be specified. You can see the rhythm. I'm going to just show you a few of the samples. This is Dakshinamurti. It's a fabulous sculpture. It's in near Kumbakonam, in a place called Dharasuram. If ever you get an opportunity to go and see the temple, it is exquisite. Please go and take a look at it. And this is composed in Dashatala or Uttama Dashatala, the highest of the Dashatala. In Ajanta, you can see the straight figure on top on the left side, standing and sitting, and the right is a figure which is in Bhanga, gracefully bent. So the same rhythmic modular component is also used in architecture. It is called Pada Vinyasa. So the entire temple is laid out in a modular manner. And the basic unit is the Garbhagriha, the size of the sanctum. So everything is laid out in multiples of the size of the sanctum, including the open spaces, which is why when you walk through particularly a temple town, the top image is of Tiruvannamalai, the temple town particularly, there is such a feeling of inner quiet and inner balance, because what you see is very rhythmic and it affects the mind in an extremely beautiful manner. This is the Tanjavur Brihadishwara. If you haven't seen it, please go and see it. It's spectacular. And the fact that the stone that has been used for this building is not locally available. It comes from Tiruchirappalli, and it was taken via the waterways to a certain distance, and then probably on carts. The structure took, I believe, 25 years to complete. And as you can see, it was built in the 11th century. Size 800 into 400 feet. Height of the Vimana 208 feet. No machines to carry your load. People are actually doing it. They are working with it. And the technique for building, unlike a lot of stuff that is coming on the internet, which says there was a ramp that was built on which it was all rolled, which is a completely absurd theory, because you have a ramp, and please note that the stone temples of that era were built without mortar, which means they were standing on self-weight. It was assembled. Until the top piece was put in, it is what is known as an unbalanced structure. So if you take something and ramp and put it against an unbalanced structure of that nature, it will fall. It's a very simple theory, actually. So the only way it could have been done was if it was enclosed. And then the top piece was placed. So they had an enclosure made of mud called Sara Kattu Suvar, which is a scaffolding wall made of mud. And all the pieces were carried on that scaffolding wall until the last piece was put in. So the sculptor himself wouldn't have seen the temple structure until it was completed. Then the scaffolding wall, which was made of mud, would have been broken, removed. And then they would have seen the entire form. This is the Kailasanatha temple, which of course all of you will be familiar with because it's close to you. This is another extraordinary achievement because they have carved from the top down of a rock mountain. And that requires skill like you can't believe it. People have always wondered, where did they take away the stone that was removed? There seems to have been no evidence of it having been taken anywhere. So the quality of this kind of work can only be done if the makers, that is the artisans or the community of artists, could have actually been trained to hold the ratios and proportions in their mind in an embodied manner. Because they didn't make life-size models, nothing. So and also it means that the team works extremely efficiently. So the one who is cutting, the one who's carrying, the one who's shaping the tools, the one who is assisting, marking, and so on, is a very synchronized team work, which even today you can't find. The fact that they could do that, and then they would have had 1,000 workmen in a site, feeding them, housing them, managing the systems, must have been a remarkable feat. Next one. So like I told you, the 5 types of craftspeople: Manu, Maya, Tvashta, Shilpi, and Vishwagnya. Let's look at all their works. Next one. Manu is the one who made the implements, both for agricultural implements, kitchen utensils, as well as implements of war. Next one. Maya is the Rathakara or carpenter, makers of Rathas. They were also, all of you know, Ratha is the moving vehicle. So any kind of moving vehicle, then the furniture. Yana, Shayana. Yana is the vehicle. Shayana is all furniture. Okay. And ships also. Maya were the ship builders. Yeah. Then Twashta, copper bell metal vessel makers. Okay. Next one. Shilpi is a stone artist. From the quarry, carrying it to the site, shaping it, cutting it, placing it, assembling it, and then sculpting it and completing it. The entire course is the work of the Shilpi. Vishwadnya are the temple jewelry makers. So these are typical temple jewelry that you can see with the dancers and so on. They also make they are the goldsmiths, Swarnakara. They make the gold ornaments both for people as well as for the temple. Yeah. Then very important aspect of Vaastu Shastra is its influence on puja and ritual. The image that has been fashioned for the Garbhagriha, all the attending the deities that have been placed in the temple, the proportions and the ratios which have been created in the temple, the sacred walk, all of it is to create this inner experience in the observer. So the statement is that you walk through the Gopuram. Gopuram is the entryway. You walk into the temple and then you see the Dvajastambha, which is the flagpole, which represents the chakras in the body. You go to the Dvajastambham, touch the base, which represents the Mooladharam. So you say to the divine, may you awaken my Mooladhara so that I may touch my spiritual high. And then you walk around the temple, feel things, touch things, smell, taste the water that is given to you, listen to the chanting. And finally, when you come to the Garbhagriha, in that flickering lamplight, there is a possibility that you have an inner experience, a rasanubhava within yourself. At that point, after having done the pradakshina around the temple, you do what is known as an atma pradakshina. Because within you is the jivatma who is being awakened by this divine presence. So you say, thank you, and you go around yourself. And then you come outside and near the Dvajastambham, you offer your namaskar. So this is part of the ritual or the puja, and the temple has been designed to accentuate this. Similarly, you have the yantra, which is known as mandala in Buddhism. But yantra is a two-dimensional engraving on a metal plate, which is also geometric, which is also mathematically accurate, and is capable of evoking certain energies within yourself and the space around. Next one. Ayurveda, we finally come back and say, in the residence, not only are we bringing in the proportions and the ratios, the elements, the material, and so on, we are also creating a space for a certain Ayurvedic perspective to come into our lifestyle. This is a typical village house with a tulasi in the center. We call it a tulasi madam in Tamil Nadu. So every morning at daybreak, after having drawn the kolam on the outside, the lady of the house comes inside, waters the tulasi, removes a few of the leaves, takes it and puts it into the drinking water of the family or into the rasam. Both are acceptable. And then she lights the lamp for starting her daily routines. So the attitude of relating to the land, the plants that are good for the soil, all this is part of the Vaastu Shastra. Next one. Yeah. So the daily life, I told you the kolam. Kolam is the what you call rangoli in the north is called kolam in the south. So the top right corner, it's a chariot drawn with rice powder, and it has one single line. Anywhere you can start. It's a complex single line diagram. This particular chariot is drawn for Pongal, Makara Sankranti, January 14th. This is to say that the sun is coming into our lives. Similarly, you also have the terracotta horses, which is also part of the South Indian village. And these are votive objects. And next to it, people come when they want to pray for children, for better harvest, for marriage, and so on. For what are known as Mangala Karyam, for things that will bring auspicious activities in their own lives. On the right, you can see the typical village space where all the activities are taking place. Almost all of Vaastu Shastra comes from this tribal root, where you're creating a relationship between open space and built form.
Right. So we have the session open for questions.
I have a question for you, ma'am, that now we are short of space on the earth and we are just going into high rises.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we, what does Vastu mean when we construct 80-story buildings and you're living on the 80th floor, and how do we connect space with Vastu at such a time?
This is a complicated situation and a fairly important question, I accept. There are ways in which this can be handled. For example, I carry out what is known as Yantra, Mantra and Tantra. It is a part of what I call Chikitsa Vastu. That people are living in spaces which are uncomfortable, they're feeling negative energies, they're not feeling that their life has any meaning and so on. We usually work with that and assist them into recharging the energy of that space. You can't change the reality of the 80th floor. But if you can recreate an experience of the earth there, then it is possible to put to rest the anxiety that the people are holding. Because the moment you go away from the earth, there is a natural connection that is being lost. So it will lead to certain senses of anxieties and sleeplessness and stress and all that sort of stuff, digestive problems and so on. So there are ways in which this can be handled through this Yantra Mantra Tantra process.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm Ushma Williams. I'm a student of Sanskrit. So one of the things that is very clear is that Vastu, so in the formation, in the manifestation of Srishti, three things come into existence first: Kal, Desh and Nimit. So Kal is Jyotish Shastra. Desh would be the Vastu Shastra, I presume. And also it's just made me realize how strongly it is intertwined with Kavya.
Mm-hmm.
The everything that you were describing is also understood. What you described was a visual explanation of rasa and bhava.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're doing Sanskrit Kavya, you're doing poetry, you're doing prose and things like that. So a lot of the same concepts are used visually through
Okay.
Vastu
Okay.
as they are used through through the literature, the literary heritage. Is that correct?
Actually, it's not only one thing like literature. Every subject actually is rhythmically connected to the other. It is quite remarkable how it all flows together and how it all has an amazing rationale. Like if you study Ayurveda and the various treatments in Ayurveda, and then you go and study yoga and what you can do for the body, and then you look at Vastu and how you can actually connect the locations of facilities and so on, it is amazing how they are all speaking, they're all on the same page, they're speaking about the same thing.
Shashikala ji, one of the challenges that we see a lot, especially in a country like India where the heritage is so rich, with such intricacy of the arts and the sciences, is that a lot of the essence in our times, either because of ignorance or because of lack of interest, is lost, and what we're left with are shells that are empty of any real meaning and value. And one of the big dangers of such a result is a lot of superstition, a lot of fear mongering, and all sorts of things of this sort. The truth is that, especially in most of urban India that I know, the spirit of Vastu or the spirit of all of these other ancient sciences, as I would call them, has been lost to such an extent that sometimes it becomes almost easier to just dismiss it, so that at least I'm not getting caught up into the tangles of superstition and fear, and not bother. What is your perhaps suggestion on the way to navigate this?
I think I'll just need to give you a quick listing of where we started on this journey. When we were in our 20s, my husband, myself, and about 15 or 18 of contemporaries who had all done our university education from various parts of the country. Many of them were technical people, IITs and IIMs and so on. We were deeply influenced by this person called Dharampal. And Dharampal, I think it's very important that all of you search for it, and all his material is available online. He was an amazing man. And he told us that unless one generation of Indians decides to take about 10 years to study the tradition and bring it back into the mainstream, it's going to get lost. So he challenged us. He said, you're all in the early 20s. Are you willing to give that 10 years? And we said, yes. So I gave 10 years to Vastu. My husband gave 10 years to yoga. A couple of them gave it to for Vedic maths and so on. So there were 18 or 20 of us, and we had this place called PPST, very wonderful center. A lot of magazines came out. We had several national level exhibitions where we showcased the traditional people, their knowledge, and so on. So I have a feeling that somewhere along the line, people have to make a choice. Like Dharampal ji told us, either you run behind the tail of the West, or you go back into your own past and become masters. We chose the second. So it depends. I think you have to take the trouble. It has been lost. It has been lost very badly, and been given a very, very negative press. It continues to be given a negative press. And of course, the manipulators have got onto the bandwagon and started misusing it, which is bound to happen. When the architects don't know the subject, the so-called Vastu Pandits are going to jump up and do the needful, right? So we have to learn it. Just as our traditional healing requires to be learned, so that you don't go running to the doctor, the closest allopathic doctor for every small thing. Yeah. and you learn to use your kitchen to heal yourself.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
How do we bring Vastu in our homes, like on an everyday basis? Because there are key principles, like, I mean, that you should have, the directions, like what, I mean, like we all generally know Vastu as, directions for water, fire, like the elements, and maybe directions of how you sleep and, where the room should be. But in an urban space, in a flat where restrictions are there, how do you really go about planning it? And is it individual?
It's difficult for me to answer it in a nutshell because there are lots of things you can bring in. It might be a good thing if you wrote to me and I'll send it to you. What are all the things you can do? Because it is not, I don't believe in the formula-based Vastu at all. I believe it's a one-on-one. Just as everything else, Ayurveda also works one-on-one. Your Prakriti. Similarly, yoga also. You don't have a standard. So it depends upon where you are coming from. I would address that. Where is your level of sensitivity? Based on which I will tell you what is it that you can bring into your everyday life. Can you change it by changing some colors? Can you bring in elements? Can you do it by shifting your furniture? So many things can be done by adopting certain measures for shifting. Basically, it is to shift the energies.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sashikala ji, for such an insightful session on Vastu and helping us know and connect it with our lives. And as Sashikala ji has shown us that it's not only about the external space, it's actually about the internal space. So I hope that we all will take a step forward in our inner quest and from the wisdom we have gotten from this session.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shashikala ji.
Thank you.
Thank you.